Thanks, Ann. This is retro now for me because Dan McDowell's sitting here, and I think I taught you, Dan, your first level one. What was that? 40 years ago?
More like 50?
In Ottawa.
Yes.
So I just aged myself, first of all. What we're going to do, guys, is talk briefly about the insurance program. We'll try to answer your questions as best we can. Just so you know what I do in Ottawa, I oversee, obviously, the risk management safety part of things. I do the insurance, some of the insurance with Glenn McCurdy as well. So I do the accidental death and dismemberment insurance, which is the more catastrophic area. And I do the accidental medical dental and work on that part of the policy as well. Glenn is more kind of the liability side and the direct officer liability side. So we'll address that a little bit here as well. We'll do questions as we go here. So if you have any, please let me know. I do want to really clarify the participant fee and what that fee is and where that fee goes, because I know we get those questions all the time. The types of coverages we'll talk about: the health benefits trust, which is the accidental medical dental, the accidental death and dismemberment, which I talked about, the commercial general liability. Within commercial general liability, there is a sexual misconduct liability clause as well, so there's coverage in there for that. And the directors and officers liability insurance I'll touch on. I will not pretend to be a professional in that area, but certainly we'll touch on it, and I'll try to familiarize you a little bit. Some important reminders about making a claim within your association, and finally event sanctioning, which is that big topic as what's insured and what's not insured as a minor hockey association. We'll try to go through that as best we can. Just a little history here. I think that as members of Hockey Canada's members of BC Hockey, you know that we've taken a leadership role with respect to insurance in this country. We have a national insurance program. We have a relatively small premium for the type of coverage that we get and the amount of coverage we get. The insurance world has taken several hits in the last little while since September of 2011. There's been other catastrophic things that have occurred, and premiums have gone up because insurance has been relied upon more and more. We have been locked in, which has really benefited our members, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the premiums. It's really a misnomer to say, therefore, that insurance is driving up registration costs, because in fact it's not. It's stayed stable since 2005. The premium, as it sits now, is $16.15. That is part of, obviously, the assessment that gets paid to the branch. Okay, so part of. And because we're such a large membership, having 600, 700,000 volunteers and players involved, we're able to keep that premium at a fairly consistent rate, as I said. Here's a little bit of a breakdown as to where that money goes. 55% of that goes to general liability, so $8.90. 16% of it goes to accidental death and dismemberment. Okay, so that's about $2.50. 15%, $2.50 again, is the way it's rounded up and down. Goes to deductibles and administration. So policy administration, all the costs that are part of renewing and everything that we do within the Ottawa office. $1.25 goes to the accidental death, or I'm sorry, the accidental dental policy, which is a self-driven policy. So the general liability, the accidental death and dismemberment are done through a broker, through underwriters. Okay, the medical dental that I'm going to talk about, we do internally. So we collect that $1.25, that goes into a health benefits trust fund, and then the program is administered through Hockey Canada. So it's not administered through a broker. And then $1 goes to risk management, 50 cents goes back to the branch, and you saw that budget last night presented, and 50 cents comes back to Hockey Canada for risk management initiatives, everything that you do that's Hockey Canada based. Any questions on the premium? No? The Health Benefits Trust Program. This is the accidental medical dental program I talked about. This is the self-driven program. So it's a self-insured program. It's managed by Hockey Canada on behalf of you guys, on behalf of the members. The coverage is in excess of other valid collectible insurance. So It's a secondary insurance program. This is the program that when you fill out your injury report form, this is what you're falling back to, okay? And it's in excess, so your provincial coverage comes first, so your BC health coverage. Your private policy comes next if you have it. So if you work for the government or you work somewhere where there's a private insurance policy in place, that comes next. Then the Hockey Canada policy comes third, okay? Up to obviously our limits and our sub-limits within that policy. Coverage will also respond, obviously, if somebody only has provincial coverage and does not have that private insurance. We will then respond as a secondary coverage. Some of the limits, and I'm not going to go through them all. The dental limits basically, and this is the overriding limit, this is the full limit of the policy. For dental expenses per tooth is $1,250 with a $2,500 maximum, okay, on the dental coverage. Medical expenses, so that accidental medical world, there's a $5,000 limit per accident. Now there's all kinds of supplements in there that I'm going to talk about in a second, but it's a $5,000 limit per accident. These are some of the sub-limits. Again, I won't dwell on them too much. It's all in Safety Requires Teamwork, which is on the website. So physiotherapy is $500 per year, not per accident. Prosthetic appliance is $1,000. Tuition expenses, which we're getting more of because of concussions, I'll talk about that in a minute, is $2,000. Emergency taxi benefit is $40, so I know mom's at the rink and little Johnny or little Sarah get hurt, they go to the hospital, mom doesn't have a car, so she's got to go to the hospital as well, that kind of thing. Travel expense benefit is $100, so for some reason mom and dad have to travel from one town to another town because of an injury, that kind of thing. 100% ambulance expense. In some province or territories, ambulances are covered by health insurance to a certain point. Some cover 100%. There are some provinces where it's not covered, where it's privatized. So we will cover 100% of that cost regardless of what the situation is. Loss of income benefit is the most understood part of the accidental medical dental. I think it's the way it's titled, the way it's worded. It is a benefit. It's not to replace income. Okay, and that's where we kind of fall short, I guess, on how we label it. What it is if a referee gets hurt or a coach gets hurt or an older player who's working full-time, after 30 days, so there was a 30-day waiting period, they could claim up to $250 a week, so up to $1,000. We have now reduced that as of September 1st. There's going to only be a 14-day waiting period. We found, especially taking on adult hockey, taking on Canlan, that a lot of the adult players obviously get hurt, and for them to wait 30 days is just not realistic. So we've dropped that date. We'll see what happens. But that's what it'll be starting September 1st. Any questions on those? Concussion injuries. There's not a specific concussion coverage under this policy. I'll talk about another concussion coverage under AD&D in a minute. But we do consider injuries related to concussion rehabilitation under some of the sublimits that exist. So the $500 per year, there's a lot of situations now with concussions. Kids are getting physiotherapy as part of the rehab. So obviously that would be covered under that $500. Neuropsychology, we would also consider certain treatments under neuro up to that $500 limit under physiotherapy. Tuition expenses, a lot of kids are missing school as they rehabilitate, so we would consider that under the tuition amount. Okay, and it's important to note, you guys talked about baseline testing this morning, we do not cover baseline testing. Okay, pre-baseline testing is not an accident. Pre-baseline testing is an intervention, so it would not be covered under the policy. These are some of the things we don't cover under that self-driven accident plan. Anything obviously eligible under private plan. So if your private plan comes in and pays for everything, we're not going to jump in. Anything paid by a government hospital, obviously. Benefits for non-resident playing hockey in Canada without a primary coverage. Any of the associations have American players? So, yes, I know you do. Okay, so it's really important that if you have American players coming into this country to play hockey, they have to secure primary insurance. We will not act as a primary insurance if that player goes to the hospital. Okay.
With regard to that, Todd, with what I understand to be Obamacare happening down in the States, are more parents in the States getting coverage, which would then be transferable if their child came up to play?
Not yet.
Not yet?
That could happen then, but
Okay.
I haven't heard of it yet, but I mean, it could be something that's coming with their new, I won't pretend to know a lot about
Yep.
the new plan,
Yeah.
but it could be something that happens with the new plans.
So we have a large international pool that comes to play C division.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, is there like a minimum policy that they have to
No.
provide? And do they have to provide proof of insurance to us as an association?
That's up to you.
Yeah.
I mean, all we say is just make them very aware that they have primary insurance when they come into the country. And that's so important. And even when we have teams going to other countries, make sure that they've got a travel insurance that covers sport injury. Okay? Because it's great to say, well, there's $5,000 coverage here, but if you go to an American hospital, that $5,000 is not going to go a whole long way. Right? So really, really important.
I was going to say in schools, because I have lots of international students, they have to bring proof that they have, like, whether they buy insurance like Blue Cross or Sun Life or Manulife or whatever it is, but they have to have proof. So if a kid is in school, then they've got it.
Yeah. And I say no, I mean, we don't want, I mean, if you want to do that as an association, that's the
Well,
best practice.
So if someone does not have the primary insurance
Yeah.
and this package is not going to cover them, does it impact the event for any of the other players?
Well, it won't impact the event, no,
He
but
just
it will
won't have
certainly
coverage.
impact that family if they
Right,
go to the
well, no,
hospital,
but-
right?
So does that family then charge the $16?
Which family are we talking
So
about?
if it's, I have an American family with 2 boys that are in Sioux,
Yes.
and do they still get
Well,
charged the $16?
if they're, are they registered with you?
Yes, they are,
They would pay that $16.
but they don't get covered under it.
They get covered under this.
Oh,
But
they
what
do.
we're saying is it's a secondary policy. So they still need a
not the
policy,
primary insurance.
but it's not their primary insurance. They
Okay.
need a policy, so if they go to the
I'll have to
hospital,
check with them.
they're covered, right?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of, we had one situation where a dad, who was an American dad, and his son was playing up in Canada. And what he was doing was, if something happened, he was paying it and claiming it to his American insurance, which is fine, but it took the American insurance months to respond.
Yeah.
So now he's out of pocket $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. So, okay, does that make
Yep,
sense?
that does make sense, thanks.
Okay, eyeglasses or contacts we don't cover, obviously. Sickness or disease, so if there's a chronic sickness, chronic disease, that would not be covered. Artificial teeth, knee braces and similar devices needed to play hockey. If the brace is needed for everyday life and it's prescribed and explained by a physician, it's for everyday life, then we will consider coverage of that brace. Equipment replacement, again, we get asked that all the time. Unfortunately, if the paramedics come and they decide to cut the equipment off, then that's not covered under the policy. Okay. And that doesn't mean you stop the paramedics from cutting the equipment off.
Tell them to cut the strap.
Just wanted to clarify. The claim process, and I'm sure most of you know it, I'll just go through it very quickly here. So the Hockey Canada injury report form, which I'll show you in a minute, I'm sure you've all seen it. Every time you have an injury where you think that they're going to fall back on that coverage, now or in the future, you should have that form filled out and submitted. Okay, really important. And you don't have to have the receipts to submit it. Submit the form, get it approved by the branch, have the branch send it to us, and then you can submit receipts after. You don't have to wait for say, physio receipts. So.
Sorry, in the case of where it's not an accident, but it's an injury that has been created by just playing hockey, for example, my son had some severe tendon issues he had to go see a specialist about and receive physiotherapy and stuff. I mean, we never submitted a claim for that, but would that fall under it even though
It
it
would,
was a
as long
specific physical
as long as the
injury?
physician is saying that it's based on hockey,
Okay.
then you're fine, right? So, okay?
My question was gonna be, I've had a number of injury report forms returned from BC Hockey, and I wish Ann was here, but I've had them returned, like I filed them, I think there's gonna be a claim somewhere down the line, so let's get the form in and started.
Yeah.
They return it and say, please complete the form, or please submit the receipts, etc. There are no receipts at
That's
that
up to the
time.
branch, so you need to talk to them on their policies there, Dan.
Okay.
Bottom line is, we won't do anything until the branch approves what they've received. So you should talk to her about, I think she's here this weekend, actually.
Yeah.
Megan as well, talk to one.
Good.
Okay. Must be completed by the injured party and the attending dentist or physician. That second page is really important. That's why we have not gone to electronic submissions. Okay, we're getting a lot of questions about that. It's starting. Great West Life, obviously, a lot of the insurance companies now, you can go on and do it online. I don't know where it's going to go with us. I mean, we have the capability of entering, the Canadian Hockey League enters it online, but they still have to send us the form because we need that hard copy injury report forms. It's got to be submitted within 90 days, and it's online, available online, as the Safety Requires Teamwork is available online as well. This is your form. All the forms are the same across the country, just a different logo in the top corner. Okay. This area right down here, health insurance information, is very important. That one we typically have problems, it doesn't get filled out.
That's where ours get kicked back.
Yeah.
If
There you
part's
go.
not-
Okay.
If that part's not completely filled out.
Yeah. And that means the branch is doing their job, because if it gets to us, it delays it even further, because we have claims piled this high, and by the time you get to that 2 weeks after it comes in, now Jane or Marissa have to say, oh, now I gotta go back to that person and get all that information. So it delays it a little further when that happens.
Often we'll get a kickback around the signature portion.
Yep.
From parents,
Yep.
right? And I'm just wondering, that because as the association risk manager, I'll get an email saying, please connect with, so-and-so, have them sign form and
Yep.
resubmit.
Mhm.
But I never hear back, like,
You hear back from,
anybody that it has in fact been done, like, that there's not a problem.
yeah, we won't, if you don't hear, it's good news.
Okay.
I mean, with the number of claims that we get on a daily basis, there's no way that we can call everyone and say, hey, we've got your claim, good to go.
Yep.
Like, there's just, it's not feasible for us, right? So you're gonna hear, if there's something wrong, you're gonna hear, okay? So I think that's a good practice to go by as you're running your associations. Okay, fair enough? Phew, I got through that one. I don't usually, just so you know. The Hockey Canada injury report form goes to that program that I discussed, for whom a premium's been paid. That premium gets paid through your branch, through that whole process of assessment fees. There are volunteers such as timekeepers that are kind of outside that premium world that obviously are covered, okay? They may not have as much coverage on things like AD&D, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but they're still covered when they're doing timekeeping or helping in a tournament. All I can say is make sure that you've got a good list of your volunteers. And even if they're a one-time volunteer and you're having an event, it's good to have a list. That way you've got something that says, hey, yeah, I mean, we had engaged this person to help us do this. It really helps if there is a claim. Okay. And we talked about the supplemental insurance. Any questions on the self-driven insurance program? We are tied in now premium-wise to 2016, so we're in good shape. Accidental death and dismemberment, this is one of the policies that I work on at the Ottawa office. This covers very serious permanent injury, okay? And it's obviously if you're participating or traveling to and from a sanctioned event, so it's an event that's been approved by your branch. This is done through a broker, through BF Lorenzetti, using underwriters. AIG in this case are the underwriters for AD&D. And again, it's all covered under that premium that you pay. I won't go through all of those. You can see there's a whole series of losses that are covered. Some of the most common are loss of sight, paraplegia, which I'll talk about in a minute, loss of life. We probably do 8 to 10 loss of life a year, most of them car accidents. Okay, so they're car accidents going to and from the rink. We would cover the player. We don't cover mom and dad, but we cover the player who's paid a premium if that player were to pass away. So, and that would go to their estate, obviously. So, okay, so, and we do loss of sight, I think we're at 2 or 3 a year. And then there's a whole other series. And you're sitting there saying, well, what do you do the rest of the time?
How do they figure out that the loss of 1 foot is 50? Like it just seems really
I know.
weird to me.
There's a whole series, believe it or not, there's a whole, AIG has, just so you know, that's a good question, Ann, because often people think we make the decisions and we don't. I play the information manager, and we take the information from the accident, we submit it to the insurers, they have a medical team who will then use a whole gamut of parameters when they look at the claim and make that decision. Okay, so it's the insurer that makes the decision. We make sure the information gets to them. The insurer ultimately will make that decision.
I have a question about policy, travel policy.
Yeah.
So I'm in Port St. John, we have obviously we travel in nasty weather.
Yep.
How does our policy of whether to go or not go affect the insurance?
Insurance is a safety net, okay? And we often get asked, well, there's a coach on the ice without a helmet. How does that affect insurance? Well, the reality of it, it doesn't. Insurance is there for when people don't do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
The problem is that every time somebody does something they're not supposed to do, there's 2 things that happen. Your exposure goes up, okay? Then your premiums will start to go up. That's where risk management is so important. The other thing that happens is there could be liability. And if there's liability, that's where things like that are going to come out.
Right.
Okay? Those policies saying that are really association and branch driven. So that's a question you need to ask them. Okay?
But you're covering it under the general liability
Yes.
side of things.
Yes.
I mean, an example is an interesting question. I had one that came up at this tournament, right? We had a young ref whose client wanted to get him to the ref clinic, but there'd been decisions. I'm brand new president, so I had nothing to do with the decision. Yeah.
You said that last year.
I wasn't the president. I was new to the board. Anyway, so where's the decision? Okay, we got a budget to go to the BC Hockey. It's this. Here are the people. Oh, what about this guy? And he's like a young guy. He's the future of our reffing program. Really great to get him to the thing. Blah blah blah. And I was presented with, well, he would agree to drive up, go to the thing, drive back in 1 day, no hotel, right? And I'm like, okay. I don't think so. I'm not sending a 20-year-old out on 10 hours of driving in a day, you know.
You know what, guys? I mean, risk management's common sense.
Yeah.
But I'll also say that you guys are lucky as a branch, and I'm not saying this because Ann's standing here, but you've got an excellent branch risk manager. And those are the things you need to address. And I don't even know if you have to have a written policy more than you have to have a best practice. And those are the types of things that you need to discuss, and you've got a good branch, you're in a good branch, you've got good leadership, so talk to them, and best practices are so important when it comes to that stuff. Paralysis is a whole different world with respect to our AD&D coverage. Now, this is where that, I talked about volunteers who don't actually pay a premium and those that do. Your class 1 are everybody that's paid a premium, so coaches, managers, everybody who is directly involved with the game, right? Class 2 would be more that timekeeper and the people that have not paid a premium. They're kind of covered under that umbrella of premium costs. You can see there's a difference because the chance of this exposure is so little. I mean, for a timekeeper to actually have paralysis due to a hockey event is very low. This is the main coverage here. So if a player goes into the boards head first or suffers some kind of spinal injury, then there's that $1 million coverage that would cover them. in that case. There's another part of the policy where there's all kinds of sub coverages, funeral expenses, eyeglasses, rehabilitation, especially if there's paralysis, that's very important. Home alteration as well. Repatriation, I can never say that word, benefit, and tutorial fee benefit. Those are all very important, but these don't fall into play unless this is paid. Okay, so it only falls into play with the AD&D policy. Critical incident stress counseling is also really important. And I'm going to talk about reporting in a minute when this stuff happens, but this is key in the first 24 to 48 hours. And again, this will only fall into play if it looks like we're going to have a claim under AD&D, but we will also help under the medical dental. Even though there's not a coverage there, we will help with immediate counseling if there's a car accident and somebody dies on the ice or something like that. So,
What if you get sued for a kid becoming a quad
yeah.
and there's a court judgment of $4 million?
Yeah, we will, I'll talk about liability insurance in a minute. Obviously, as long as there's no criminal intent there, then there's coverage under the liability policy. That is totally separate from this. This is a one-time
They
pay.
interconnect though, like when I see quadriplegia, you know, like that's just a given, you get $1 million.
Yeah, that's a one-time payout to the family, or actually to the player.
Player and trust, I
Yeah,
guess.
to the trust, yeah.
But if they feel there's some liability beyond.
Then it goes to the
what's
liability
max, and
policy.
then there would be some additional
Yes.
coverage.
That's where that $20 million liability
Right.
policy is.
So sorry, the repatriation benefit of
Yeah.
$25,000, that's to get you home.
Yeah.
So this isn't, even if we were not having a travel coverage for playing, let's say, in the US, say we went to Colorado
Yes,
and you need to be repatriated home,
yes.
so,
It would cover the death as long as the death is deemed to be an accident.
right.
And it falls under this policy.
Okay. It's just, I asked because I know a lot of, like, because we were talking earlier about you have to have your own primary policy. A lot of primary policies don't even include repatriation.
This has nothing to do with primary or
Okay.
secondary. This is a one-time payout that falls into place as soon as this happens.
Okay.
Okay? The key is, and I'll add this, that if you're playing a non-sanctioned, a team that's not sanctioned under USA Hockey, then you are not under the Hockey Canada insurance.
Right.
Okay, so make sure it's approved by the branch, make sure that the branch has said, yes, it's approved, and we're playing the USA Hockey sanction.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's true in any country. It's got to be under an IIHF, International Ice Hockey Federation, within that country. Okay.
So the teams that are kind of, I guess, just in Washington State though, they're covered actually through Hockey Canada, correct?
No, they would be, are they under?
They're under
our
Pacific
members.
Coast, so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, if they're under
Yeah.
Pacific Coast, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, sorry, yeah, so, okay. Any other questions? Okay, AD&D coverage, there are some important steps. If there's a potential AD&D claim, so something happens on the weekend and there's a potential that it's going to fall under one of these. So it could be accidental death, could be potential paralysis, potential loss of sight, potential loss of use. Anything that's major, then it's really important that you contact your branch immediately and report all the details of the claim to your branch. So whoever your branch, I think Jeremy is the person, I think Megan is in there as well, so just know who your branch contact is. The member's name, DOB, and just a little description of the accident is really all we need right away. Okay, that's what that helps us. The branch will contact us and we'll immediately advise the insurers even on the weekends. Okay? Although my wife doesn't like that. That's the way it is, okay? I'm just kidding. So on the weekends, yes. Okay, so even if it's a weekend, shoot an email off to one of the BC hockey staff and make sure you get it in there. We'll get it reported. Then we'll deal with it on Monday. And we may come back to Jeremy and say, Jeremy, if it's a death, make sure the team gets counseling. We'll cover up to a certain amount. So that stuff takes place as soon as we get that information.
Are these numbers as big as some of them are?
Yep.
Are people usually
contacting the lawyers, are they retaining lawyers, dialogue with you, or
Yeah,
is it really straight shooting, like?
You know what, and I'll talk specific to
Yeah,
paralysis,
yeah, yeah.
okay? Obviously, the $1 million is great. The thing with paralysis is it's long-term.
Yeah,
And that person has to survive on a long-term basis. So many of the families will contact legal
and then
counsel.
they dialogue, yeah.
And well, we may continue to dialogue with the family,
Yeah.
but we will also dialogue certainly with a representative if they've identified that representative with their
So
permission.
it's not, we don't recommend trying to call a lawyer, like is that?
No, I think what you do as an organization is you make them aware of the policies.
Okay.
Send them safety requires teamwork and say, these are all the coverages.
Yeah,
And let them go through them and say, okay, yeah, this may pertain, this may pertain, this may, and let them make those
okay, I
decisions.
appreciate
Yeah.
that, thanks.
You'll be given instructions on next steps. If not that day, then obviously the next business day. Again, there are times when I'll, for example, email Jeremy back on a Saturday and say, Jeremy, just let them know to go ahead, get counseling. We will deal with it on Monday with respect to immediate costs of that counseling. Okay, any questions on AD&D? Just want to make sure I'm good here. No? Okay. This is our general liability that I talked about. This is really a big part of the premium that's paid, obviously, because it really pertains to lawsuits and settlements. Okay, so anytime there's a claim or a statement sent to us, then this policy will overtake. These are the name insured, so we are insured, all the branches are insured, all your associations are insured, your leagues, your participants, your teams. This is really a non-exhaustive list. Anybody that's basically paid a premium is covered under the liability policy. So yes, you are covered. Okay. And this is a further list. Again, this is non-exhaustive. This could go on, I'm sure, for a long time with respect to naming who's covered. But these are some of the more common that are certainly covered under that general liability policy.
Cheerleaders.
Cheerleaders, absolutely.
That's actually just a fancy name for moms in the stands.
Yes.
Unfortunately, moms in the stands aren't covered.
We just have to be
Non-roster
officially
volunteers.
named cheerleaders.
What's that?
Non-roster volunteers.
Yes,
Like the
and let's not say
short-term, yeah.
non-rostered,
Okay.
those who haven't paid a premium, because
Oh,
you should
okay.
have them on a list.
Okay, you should?
You
Oh, you
should.
said that earlier, yes, okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
whenever you, let's do it this way. Whenever you have an event,
Yeah,
list your volunteers,
okay,
and you're good.
okay.
Okay, and you don't necessarily, I don't think you necessarily have to submit it. I think you just gotta have a record.
Well,
Okay.
yes,
that's up to the
it'd be
branch.
nice.
That's
You
up
know,
to-
when you submit all your things for your tournaments,
Yeah.
these are your officials, then really, we would like you to list all the volunteers.
Okay.
And funny things happen sometimes, like people will go to, I don't know, to Safeway and say, I'd like donations for Burnaby Minor because we'd really like to know that, are they really who they say they are under there? So yeah, when you submit the names, just submit the names of who's volunteering with you.
Let's put it this way, the more information you have, the easier our job becomes,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
Or our insurer's job, I shouldn't say our job, our insurer's job becomes.
And that can be as easily as submitting a schedule for the weekend.
Correct.
At AD&D, you'll find if there's a death and it's a travel directly to and from, we will ask for the team schedule because that maintains that that person was traveling to a game or practice or tournament or whatever. So,
I was gonna say game sheets or,
yep, absolutely.
you know.
Anything like that. Anything like that, absolutely. And you'll find too, we'll submit stuff to the insurers and they'll come back and say, well, we need, for example, for a car accident, they'll come back and say, well, we need a police report, we need a toxicology report, we need an emergency report. And all that stuff is gathered after as we work through the families. The coverage, there is a $20 million per occurrence for bodily injury or property damage. We've added to that as well. There's a supplemental coverage as well that would take place, but that $20 million really does the job. Hockey Canada covers each registered player for liability. Yes, coaches are covered and managers and that kind of thing as well. The intent needs to be accidental and not deemed intentional, obviously. So if there's an intentional intent, then that coverage is going to be questioned. Sexual misconduct liability, as I say, is tied into that liability policy, and this covers liability arising out of alleged actual sexual misconduct for which the insured, so say the coach, for example, may be held legally liable. And obviously, we'll pay defense costs of the accused in civil court unless they were proven guilty. So we're not going to pay the defense costs for a Graham James type of situation. Right? And there's a $25,000 settlement. Directors and officers, and I know this is one of the most complicated coverages that you'll see. There's several tiers of coverage. There's a certain amount at the national level, there's a certain amount at the branch level, and then there's another amount for the association and another amount for the actual person who's on the association executive. So there are so many tiers of coverage. But it relates to your obligation to manage the association with due diligence, obviously. You are considered the most responsible and therefore obviously could be the most potentially liable if something were to go badly wrong. It's concerned with alleged wrongful acts on the part of directors and officers, so those that sit on your executive, in the manner in which they perform their duties, including board decisions. This is where it's really important. If you sit on a minor hockey association executive, you at least know what the decisions are that are being made, even if you're not there. Okay, like that's where minutes are so important and those kinds of things. It's all knowing what's happening and knowing what the decisions are that are being made within your executive. Things that you could be liable for, and this again, this is non-exhaustive, guys, but employee discrimination, wrongful dismissal if you have in fact hired employees in your association. Activities of your volunteers. We are responsible. Hockey Canada is responsible. Branch is responsible. The association is responsible for the acts of our volunteers. That's why we put so much education in place. That's why it's so important. Okay. Enforcement of association or government regulations. A lot of this becomes very complicated, as I said. Providing advice to members. So if your board association puts out a recommendation and says, we want you to do this in a certain way, and that doesn't turn out to be real well done, then there could be a claim there. Unpaid wages, withholding taxes, misleading acts. There's again a whole list of stuff within the policy that could be covered with respect to directors and officers.
Is there some sort of test in terms of where do you get absolute coverage, or if you're found to have made a poor decision?
And test in what way?
Well, in the sense of sort of parallel to you're found guilty on the other, say the sexual harassment one.
Yeah.
You're not paid if you're found guilty.
Yeah.
If this case, if say there was a civil action over a decision, this is a real problem for me actually. I'm worried about where I'm taking a certain position on something.
Yes.
And I'm doing it the best of my ability, and I've sought some legal advice. If I ended up getting sued
Yes.
by someone in
Yes.
the association for the decision I've decided you made, if at some point a court said you were in the wrong, am I covered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. DNO is there to cover you unless there's an intent, and what I'm hearing is you did that to the best of your ability and the best of your knowledge.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And it's a complicated legal problem. where
And all
I can
that
see
comes
two-
out,
yeah.
just so you know what happens, and I'm going to talk about reporting this stuff in a minute, but what happens is once it's reported to us, it goes to our insurers will then take over and do an investigation. And when I say an investigation, they're going to talk to you, they're going to talk to all the parties involved, and that's where all that stuff is solidified. Okay, like that becomes really important, and we have investigators in place under our policy that will contact you and do that investigation.
I said this earlier, just probably, I think it was in a meeting, something you were at, but you know, as hockey, well, it was the present meeting, as hockey's getting more expensive,
Yeah.
there are a class of parents who view us as service delivery, and they start to not see us as an association in which they're a member. They start to have a potentially quite a litigious view, you know, in terms of why am I not getting X, and you know, and that's kind of the way the world's going. And especially as much as all of this governance that we're moving to, which is kind of staff delivery versus volunteer work, that also opens us up to, oh, you have a professional, professional staff doing these things, therefore suddenly they start to be, and I think that new governance thing, which I support, but I do think it actually is going to add some risk on this side of things.
I just think, and I just think it comes back to, and I'm going to use that broad term of due diligence. It just comes back to making sure that when you're making decisions, you're basing your decisions on good knowledge, and I won't say research, I mean, you're not going to research every decision, but good knowledge and good best practice. And I think if you do that, you're good. It's just a case of ensuring, so for example,
Yeah.
and I'll simplify it and say, for example, the Hockey Canada Safety Program.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's an important program. And it needs to be sit down and you need to assess it. And you need to say, hey, yeah, we need to have this person on the bench. We need to, it's recommended in the program, that there are other courses in professional development that Ann talked about. Hey, let's solidify that and make that happen. Like, it's all about that. And you know what? I'll be the first guy to tell you that associations, you guys have so much to do. And you can only do so much. So, but if you're showing that you're acting in due diligence, I think you're in good shape.
It's just that the world's changing around us.
Oh, no question.
That's
No
the
question.
thing.
Yeah, no question.
We may be doing that, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get sued.
And that's why the coverage is
risk
there.
is higher.
That's why the coverage is there.
Todd, can I just ask
Yeah.
a question? What about parent conduct?
Yeah.
And decisions that the board may make with regards to, say, the team's traveling and the parents are a little bit out of hand on a weekend?
Yeah.
And the executive kind of makes a decision based
Well-
on that?
Yeah, whether it's covered, you mean?
Yeah.
So this is a key statement here, guys. There has to be a request for damages and compensation for D&O to kick in. So they have to be coming and suing the board, right? So there has to be that request.
Yeah.
Then if they are, then it's going to be looked at. I can't tell you how much is going to be covered. Again, it's so complicated. But things like that, report it right away. Okay? And that's key. Claims made by volunteer.
Sorry, the thing's blowing down on the,
Oh, that's it.
the air conditioner, I was trying to change it and he goes, no, but I like. Everybody,
It's a guy-gal thing. The guys are all warm.
and we're cold, is that what you're trying to
That's
say?
what I say. Old, chilly, I think is. I
Claims
didn't say that.
need to be made by volunteers, employees, government bodies, suppliers, customers, general public. Again, that's not exhaustive, that's some of the ones that we're seeing. Okay? And as you say, I mean, I think we're getting more of it. We're seeing more of it.
Well, it terrified me, you
Yeah, I know.
as a president, suddenly you've got this thing going sideways and you're like, Jesus, I just want to volunteer for my kids' hockey.
Yeah, I know, I know.
$1 million liabilities,
It's all about, guys, at the executive level, and I know most of our executives do it, I know you do. Have a good constitution.
It's 10
Keep- Keep good.
My computer tells me
It's a
to.
reminder.
Is that my
Hurry
wife?
up, Todd.
It is, I use her voice.
It's having a good constitution, it's making sure you got good minutes, it's making strong decisions, and not just around safety, around everything. Right? And if you don't know an answer, then find out the answer before you make those decisions. It's all around that broad due diligence term that we all use, right? It's like the term respect. It's so huge. But I think if you do that, then you're in good shape. And show that you're making progress. You may not do everything year one, but you say, okay, well, year 2, 3, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that Seaford Minor Hockey, we talked about this in the President's meeting.
Yeah.
We've already instituted a lot of the structure of places that Hockey Canada is moving towards.
Right.
And you're exactly right. I share your concerns because we are moving into a world where we have more paid positions. And people are looking more for, okay, what you're doing for me now because we're paying you.
Yeah.
And it does open us up to that problem. But if you have clear protocols, written protocols in place, and you follow them transparently, you're protected. Now that's what it comes down to.
That's a key statement.
Yeah.
That's an excellent statement. And somebody asked me in the other room whether your staff are covered under D&O. Yes, they are. As long as they are doing hockey business and doing vet business, they are hired to do, obviously. The only thing they are not covered under is dishonesty insurance. It's not in there. Something you might want to consider if you're interested. You contact Jeremy, and Jeremy can get that information. So, because I know more and more associations are hiring staff. So. This is just just real quick on the D&O policy. It's a claims-made policy, so it covers any claim made while the policy is in force. It covers any claim you didn't know about that surfaces from the past. If you're aware of any existing situations, make sure you report it to your branch. Worldwide territory, it covers claims from anywhere in the world in any court. Coverage for non-entities. So if your association does not have a constitution, there are some out there that don't, obviously there wouldn't be coverage there. Volunteers and spousal coverage, so it would cover spouses and heirs if they happen to get named in that D&O policy for some reason. Libel and slander, so it covers liability for written or verbal slander of someone if someone sues you because they feel they've been slandered. Penal defense costs for criminal activity, and administrative errors and omissions, so overlooking something you were supposed to do. So you guys vote on something and say, well, we're going to do this, and it doesn't get fully done, and somebody comes back and says, well, where's what you said you were going to do? So.
Does the, you might have answered this, the libel and slander,
Yes.
just because you're dealing with kids and emotions
Yep.
and it's heightened and all of that.
Yep.
Does that also cover employees? So when you have registrars and schedulers and stuff that are employees, it also?
You mean paid employees?
Absolutely.
Yes. If they're paid and with the association,
Yeah,
right? So,
Okay.
and that's where and the only thing is the dishonesty insurance. Which
right, if it was, okay.
What happens if your association doesn't pay anybody? They don't have the money to pay.
Straight volunteer.
Well, it's just your board then.
So it's still covered.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm thinking none of our.
Yeah, no,
we don't
it'd be
have the
just your
money.
board that's covered.
Yeah.
So your executive.
We don't.
Right, we don't,
You don't have the money to hire somebody.
we're sued. We barely have the money.
I was gonna say, you make the same money as I do. Gee. We're
So
highly paid.
specific to liability claims, contact your branch immediately, much similar to AD&D. The branch will contact Hockey Canada, who will immediately advise us again, and you'll be given instructions on next steps through your branch on what to do and where to go and who to contact and not contact. Okay. And it may take a few days, but you will be contacted. So. Questions on coverages? Okay, so when are you covered? So Hockey Canada branch sanctioned events when playing member teams only. So if you're playing a non-member team, then you are not sanctioned. And obviously anything you're doing needs to be approved by the branch.
I know a lot of associations, near the end of the year, want to put on things like parent versus player games,
Yep.
those kinds of things.
I will tell you that from Anne's shaking her head. It's a good
We
question.
get a lot of requests for teams
I
to
know.
say we want to do this.
I will tell you this, we have a very broad sanctioning guideline. The sanctioning authority, the people who say yes or no are the branch,
Right.
not us, okay?
And we won't,
But within our sanctioning
No,
guideline,
for sure.
we say no, we will not cover.
Right, because
player.
we also have a lot of teams where they'll say, well, we're willing to provide our own coverage for the event.
No. But the problem is our team is not covered because they're not a member team.
Exactly. Well, they're not even necessarily a team, it's
They're
mom
not
and dad,
necessarily-
you know what I mean? Like that's the difficulty.
Don't call it a team event. it's just-
Transportation directly to and from the arena or venue, and it is directly to and from. If you stop and do groceries for half an hour, then obviously the coverage would be in jeopardy. And accommodations will be billeted at a hotel or obviously during activities at a tournament as a team. There are things we will not cover, swimming in the hotel, for example. Things like that, you have to be very, very careful. And you have to check with your branch before you engage in those types of activities. Sanctioned events take place, under clearly defined parameters. Obviously, your normal hockey activity is covered, your games, your practices, your team events. Program extensions is where you start to run into trouble. So fundraising, dryland training, all the things you do outside the normal hockey world. And it's really important you check with your branch. I know BC has a really strong sanctioning stepwise process in place, which is awesome. And that really helps us to keep our exposure down. And no, we don't insure coaches going down. And by the way, just so you know, all of these I have had requests for, okay, just so you know. So coaches going down rivers in pumpkins, we will not cover. Concerts we will not cover, dunk booths we will not cover, and wood chipping as a team fundraiser we will not cover.
Firewood in general.
Yes.
Todd,
Yeah.
One question, if, say our team was gonna do a fundraiser.
Yeah.
Let's say we wanted to do pumpkin.
Yeah.
And so, or something maybe not even dangerous, and I say, or someone says, don't worry about asking for, to be identified as a sanction of that. Are we then exposed if we don't? Exposed to,
Everything. Because
sued?
you're not under our policy anymore.
So we're just exposed to the wild world, but not necessarily to be sued by the parents for not having done. So that, okay.
So, and I'll give you an example, If this person, if this child
Okay.
was doing wood chipping as a fundraiser, and this is a true story, by the way,
Okay.
and put their hand in the wood chipper and lost 3 fingers, which they did, okay? Now, this was a long time ago, so we ended up getting pulled into it. Today, we'd probably not sanction that. But that lawsuit went on and on and on and on and cost millions of dollars.
Okay.
And you are exposed, if you have not checked with Ann and Jeremy and those people, you're not under our policy. So your coverage is in jeopardy. And so it's really important you're diligent.
Even things like, for example, and I questioned it at first, and then it dawned on me, is you know how you have potluck suppers?
Yeah.
Like, we won't even sanction those because of all of the peanut allergies, et cetera, et cetera. But we would if you went to Boston, as long as there's no alcohol, of course, but if you went to Boston Pizza to do it because they have to have food safe certification,
Yeah.
and so you're guaranteed by those things. So it's just the day and age we're in, it's
Yeah.
getting to that point.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can't do it as a team. You can still have a potluck dinner and you're just
That's right.
covered under your own medical. You're just
Yes.
not covered under yours.
And
That's
just
all,
make
right?
sure,
Yeah.
your parents are
No,
aware
aware, yes.
that they're not covered.
Is there a way to then
Most parents don't think they are.
get signed letters or something saying you can't sue us?
You know, and I'm not, again, I'm not a lawyer, guys, but, and, I mean, I've talked to our internal lawyer about it, about waivers, and it's better than having nothing, but they will not stand up a whole lot, okay? With respect to.
So can I just say, if a group of parents and a group of kids want to have something, then that's fine. But the minute that you say it's
It's a team
Burnaby
event.
Minor, or it's BC Hockey, or it's Hockey Canada, then you're going to get yourself into.
So if you say it's a team event, we're having.
Nope,
No.
it's a group of people getting
Yes,
together.
that's fine, right? What's
Just
that?
meet at Boston.
Yeah, a bunch of us were meeting at Boston Pizza.
And it
We're
just
gonna
so happens you all play hockey together.
Yeah.
What coincidence?
do- Yeah.
You mentioned US people, players coming here, but what about international players? We have a couple of players coming from Europe
Yeah.
who are part of a high school exchange,
Yeah.
who want to play in the association.
Yeah, so they would have to get, and I'm not a regs guy, they have to get permission from here. I believe Hockey Canada has to give permission, and their federation have to give permission, and they have to be players from that federation. And they should have primary insurance, or some kind of travel insurance.
Yes, isn't it though?
Yes, it is.
So it's more than just approval from our association.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to just go back really quickly to what you were just saying. The team makes a decision to go out and do something that's not sanctioned. That means the players, the parents, and the coaches are not covered. However, we as an executive, so if something happens at that event, are we as executives then not covered by our liability insurance?
Well, if you have not been given permission, I mean, you are still covered under liability, so.
Okay.
if Somebody were, but that all would be factored in, the fact, well, they never asked us, and we never gave them permission to do the event.
Right, okay,
Right, so that would all be
just a
factored in.
clarification, because all of a sudden it gets like, oh no, what do you mean, because they make a
But if
mistake.
they
we're
ask
not.
you,
But if they ask us and we say yes, but they're not asking us anyways, they're asking.
well, yeah, but you guys sign it. The sanction form is signed.
Yeah, by our.
Yes, but then we say no, and then you're fine.
But I think people need to be, and I kind of hear stuff as we're standing here, you know, and they say, oh, well, it's just an unmandatory event and don't do the sanctioning, and when you have parents and players or things playing. Inherently, I just think, I would just really strongly urge people to be very careful when they say, oh, but it's unmandatory, so let's go chop firewood or whatever. And you may want to look at it within your policy, in your own association, because with the inherent passion that comes attached to kids, think of what happens if there's a bad call at a 10-year-old's hockey game. The stands launch. Imagine though that you've just said it's a fundraiser, it's not mandatory, hope you're there, leave your jersey at home. You're not insured, but think about the child that just lost his foot or whatever, and you think that that parent's not coming after you, there's a very good chance.
Well, it goes back to due diligence, right?
Exactly, so as an executive, maybe you were left out of it, but I would not ever urge someone to say, have that parent game, go and do it, rent the ice on your own. Just be very, very careful, and I can think in Williams Lake of a situation a few years ago when it was dry land, and I will say that BC Hockey was fantastic because it was done and it wasn't sanctioned. Kind of covered them post-back because it would have been something that was covered. I just think if it was that firewood thing and the kid took the wood in the head or whatever, don't think for 1 second that that really kind person or doctor or whatever isn't coming after you, your coach and everything. So to say it's, I just have to really urge, because I've heard it just standing here.
You know what, and I think that if you guys have meetings in the beginning of the year, just make it really clear to your coaches and your staff, this is what, you know, these things are all good. These are things where you
I
gotta
just
come.
don't necessarily think our parents, which are our members, understand when we say, oh, it's unsanctioned. They don't really know what that means.
I'm not sure that's your job. I think your job as associations is to say, sorry, it's not covered under us.
Yes, and maybe that's the word that needs to be said,
I mean,
as opposed to, because
that's the
you're
decision
saying,
you're making as an association. You're saying, sorry, it's not covered under BC Hockey, and it's not covered under us. Sorry.
The sanction forms are online now, and the president doesn't have to sign them.
Yes.
You know, you can just
Yes,
send it
he
out
does.
online.
No, they'll still bring it back and ask for the,
We have it once.
oh, it's, and then.
I just know
Yes.
what
You're
else
lucky.
this past season.
Yeah.
And can you put up the building document? I'm hoping it'll come up.
Yep.
We've got about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions on insurance, guys?
I have a quick question about travel to and from games. We have an association policy that we don't, that midget age players are not allowed to travel by themselves out of town. So if, say, a player did do that, and something got
Yeah, we have no specific exclusion in our policy for that, so they would be covered, but,
Okay,
I mean, that's a
'Cause
good,
it's our-
that's not,
it's our-
I'm not saying it's a bad policy,
yeah.
but there would be coverage there if that would happen, so.
What is the policy with regards to midget age players that are driving now?
Nothing national,
There's nothing.
not national.
At the end of the day, they're legally entitled to drive.
Yeah.
But I know there are a lot of areas that have put that kind of thing in place. I can't tell you how it's working out, but, yeah.
So it'd be no different than the juvenile players.
Situation that was discussed earlier this morning, but somebody said the Hockey Canada policy says that during the national anthem, the helmets can come off.
In the rule book, it says that.
The BC Hockey says helmets have to be on.
Yep,
Let's assume that the team takes their helmets off.
yep.
Something happens.
Yeah.
And there's an incident, and there's a claim. Is
Yeah.
Hockey Canada going to cover that?
And as I said, you know, insurance is a safety net. Problem is though, Dan, when it comes to liability, again, that's the stuff that's looked at, right? Well, it's branch policy, how come the helmets came off? And that would all be pulled into it, so.
So it raises the question then of why would an association, BC Hockey or whatever, ODMHA, why would they raise the standard above what the
Well,
minimum is with
you
here?
know,
Because it generally involves more paperwork, more chance for misunderstanding.
But I'm a safety manager, you're asking a
Yeah.
safety manager, you shouldn't be asking a safety manager.
Yeah, that's what I was getting, wrong people
But
asking.
you know what, it's like saying, well, let's not have safety people on the bench because if they're not on the bench, we're exposed. Well, you know what, I mean, you have to make decisions based on what the exposure is if you don't do something. And I think that helmet part of it, the branch has done that, so.
But Hockey Canada has said there must be a safety person on the bench.
No.
No, it does
No.
not.
The regulation
Must be-
says every team must have a safety person.
Common sense.
In the ring. Nope.
No.
No, it doesn't even say, that's why it said.
The regulation says, no, the actual regulation says the makeup of a team is someone who has completed Speak Out and somebody who has completed the safety program, okay? But a common knowledge, best practice, program education tells us that person needs to be in the bench area, okay? Because if they're not, and you know what, I mean, this goes back to the speed you need to respond to certain types of situations. And that doesn't mean treating the injury, it means being there quickly, getting EMS, making sure that you get somebody from the stands with first aid if you need to. That's also important within that program, right? So
if you are an
HCSP.
yes, like when I was one on the team, I said, the coaches were like, well, you don't need to be here. I'm like, well, I need to be here because my name's on that sheet. And do you not have some kind of liability issue?
I'll let Ann
with your
answer
name on
that.
it?
Well, it's not, I think it's more a branch
Yeah.
regulation issue.
In our
than it's
regulations, it says that an HCSP person must be there. Doesn't say on the bench though,
Yeah.
but it
But
must
do
be
you not
there.
have as your HC,
Yes, it has to be on
you're on
the,
the game sheet, so
it
then
has to
don't
be.
you have some sort of liability?
well, you should be there is
Yes.
what it is. And referees, I mean, you know, they're kids. They should check and say, is this person here? And if they're not, then there's a problem.
Well, yeah.
And again, it depends on districts like Pacific Coast. Boy, you better be there because they will hunt you down
Yeah,
to find out, while other districts aren't looser, or not as strict as another one is. And
I
I'd
just
like
wonder
that to be in the policy.
if something happened where a kid got moved and they shouldn't have gotten, and would it be, well, where the hell?
Yeah.
No, I mean, and that's, goes back, again, due diligence, right? It
Yeah,
goes back
yeah.
to, well, that, it's common sense, that person has to be somewhere they can respond. If they're not, then.
Yeah. And also, one of the things, in the HCSP says, if you
Yes.
remember, is if I'm not going to be here and I'm playing his team, then my
Yes.
coach comes over to him and says,
Yes.
my HCSP person is not here, but could you be, can we use
Yes.
you as far as the H?
Yes.
So again, that's telling us there has to be there, they
Yeah.
must be there in order to do those things.
Did you have, sorry, did you have a comment? I missed that.
Oh,
Oh, I
just
thought you had said something, sorry.
You're covered either way. I mean,
Coverage is there.
yeah.
Like insurance coverage is a safety net,
Like, you're not a really.
right?
But it's
You know,
just
it's-
morally, ethically, I want to
Yeah.
be there. Again, I always say when I hear things, they go, well, don't worry, Ann, you're insured. Well,
I know.
but I'm more caring about that kid is on the ice, and I want to make sure there's somebody there
Absolutely.
to make sure that.
But Ann, if you're on the roster, say your safety person is not there and they're not on the, you are there and you are able to help out, you're not on the roster, so you're not able to actually go on the bench, is that not correct?
If you're not on the roster, you can't go on the bench.
That's right.
But you should be on the roster.
Yeah.
No, if say your safety person cannot be there, you can't just sub someone else
No.
in.
No, but you can, and it says in the Hockey Canada training that you can go to the other team who is rostered and say, you know, Ann is not here today for whatever reason, could you please, and we're to say, yes, not a problem, because I'm not there for just Burnaby or
Right.
just New West, I'm there for all the kids, so yes, I'll take on the
Right, do the
response.
safety for both.
For
teams,
both,
makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, it's one of the sections, right, it's on the online one too, it was in the manual as well, that we're gonna cover, right?
Anything else? Dan, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay, a couple just quick things I wanted to show you that we're working on or have just completed. One is a building document that we, risk and safety management at the national level had looked at putting building recommendations in place. They are not a policy, they are a recommendation. So minor hockey associations and leagues can build building requirements. What we've done is we've broken it down into two. One is tournaments and short-term exchanges. So if you're doing billeting in those situations. The other one is a season-long billeting situation. That's mostly with junior teams. There's guidelines for team administrators, host families, and billeted players for both situations. We've also added some tools in there from a safety perspective. The hosting family information form, so that's done prior to the player emergency contact card. So that player has a card of emergency numbers that can be contacted. Host family emergency card, same type of scenario. Billeting coordinator job description, so if you have a junior team and you're doing full-time billeting, many of them have coordinators who set up that billeting. Player permission to travel form, so that's something the player must complete if they are traveling away from their billeting home. And we've also added important words about hazing. And the reason we've done that is we felt that billeting families should be aware of things like team parties and hazing and those types of situations. So fairly good document. It's not long. It's about 15 pages. available on the website. I'm not sure what the branch is gonna do with it, and I think they're
Yeah.
still looking at it.
Yeah, we're still looking at it.
So we'll see where that goes.
Where on the website, Todd?
It's under, if you go into hockey programs, and you go into safety, and safety downloads, it's in that area. So,
Thank you.
The building's covered by, it's a sanction.
yeah, no, they're working for the team.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're part of that junior team. And can you bring that, I'm not a Mac guy, sorry.
Oh, there
So I
it
need
is.
to close that and bring up
Somebody-
the other file.
I need the
Oh,
cord, oh no, she's coming back. I was gonna say it looked like a cord cut.
and there's one harassment investigation.
Oh, good,
I
yes.
just want to show that very quickly. This is a work still in progress, folks.
Which one?
Right at the top end, that address, yes,
The number?
yes. We've been working on this for about a year and a half now. There are a lot of legal steps that we need to go through to make sure what we're doing is correct. I'm not sure even where the document is going to go. It would have to go into our board and through our board process. But we are now at the final legal review stage. It is being legally reviewed. Basically what we did was, with the help of Shalene Woodward, who is in this area, we've put together a harassment investigations manual for minor associations. We've tried to simplify it. There's a lot of information, by highlighting and putting stars beside key information to help you go through the document, be able to see the key stuff. And we're hoping it's going to be a future tool. This will give you an idea of where it's going. So investigation principles, there's a flow chart around how you do an investigation around mainly harassment, bullying, it's complaint handling, overall complaint handling. The investigator roles and that neutrality of that investigator and how that is so important. Investigator criteria, ethics around investigations, and then it goes in fairly deep with respect to the investigation process. And then there's all kinds of templates that can be used. So investigation data sheet, terms and references, interview room checklist, supply checklist. So there's a whole series of tools that can be used when you're in a situation where an investigation has to be done at the local minor hockey association. So as I say, it's a work in progress. Jeremy wanted me to bring it to your attention. I don't even have a timeline, I'll be honest, because it could come back from legal review and they could say, well, you need all these changes, and that's going to take another few months to do. So, but it is a document we are working on.
And just so, because I've been looking at it for the last couple of years too, it's not to do with abuse, right? If it's abuse, you call the 310-1234, you call in social services. This is the ones where, there's some kind of, we have several investigations, I'll just tell you, that have been going on in the lower mainland, cyberbullying and harassment and things like that. And my biggest fear is that they don't have the tools, the people who are doing the investigation, like they're not policemen and they're not social workers and they're not, they're just people like you and I, and how do they know how to do those? And it's just going down weird and wonderful roads because we don't have anything. And I mean, I keep going, well, we have something coming, but it is coming in order to help you so that you investigate the proper ways so as to protect the children and the association, etc.
So that's all I have. I guess from Hockey Canada, thanks to you guys. Keep pushing along. Risk management's a lonely world. But it's also very rewarding.
Jeremy.
So, yeah, he's coming to get me, so I'm in trouble. So, thanks guys.